The main riff, like the verse riff, it kind of came, I mean, we jammed on it, you know, who knows how long ago it was, 5 to 10 years ago, something like that. So it started off as a riff that we'd had for many, many years, like a lot of songs do, and you kind of like revisit them when you're trying to find new material to flesh out for like a new release or whatever. And this was one of like the things that we had decided to work on. And as we were working on these things, it was kind of like, let's find one to focus on real quick, just to kind of like get done, figure out exactly like what we wanted to do production wise, what type of sound we were looking for, what our kind of like I guess our mission goal was. And this one, it always was a really fun riff and a groove just to play together in the room, like you could feel it. And then so it kind of felt natural to kind of flesh out. It was a really good old riff that we loved, that we always had fun playing on. And again, we've got a handful of songs that we've already released on different records, had riffs that had been around for like since before the band existed, when me and Nate were just like jamming and stuff, you know, decades ago, that eventually like you come back to and you go, oh, that's cool. I can't believe you wrote that when you were in college. Like, and then so we'd go back and take a look at it and flesh it out. And it was always just kind of like, it was like missing parts. Like a lot of things, you always have like one cool idea, one cool riff, and you're like, that's awesome, but that's all I got. And then eventually, somehow like just serendipitous, you know, you just get like a flash of creativity or whatever, but like more things started to happen. And then suddenly we had a song that was arranged in the right amount of time and it had the right amount of parts. And then it sounded cool, it sounded right, and then suddenly you start having these flashes of creativity where you're like, I can add this, I can color it this way, I can do this type of thing, and then it became something far beyond whatever the original riff was. Well, I mean, the main thing, like the riff itself, like on its own, when we would just jam it as a 3-piece in practice and stuff, it's, you know, like there's a term that we use sometimes where it's like kind of like a beer swilling groove, which generally just means like a 6/8, like do 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 do, or you think about guys going with a beer, just like spilling and like yelling in like a bar singing, and it kind of had that type of weird vibe to it, and so that always needed to be there. But then again, we were stuck on just that groove naked for so many years. It was like, what if we add some different elements and textures to it, and maybe that'll spark what else needs to happen to turn into like a finished product. And so it started off as this like very like, again, like beer swilling kind of like 6/8 heavy groove, like again, like there's, you know, thing like Melvin's Mastodon, even like, you know, Metallica, Don't Tread on Me. It's like, that's what, when it was like after the song was kind of done, like I remember I was just randomly like listening to Black Album one day and Don't Tread on Me came on. I was like, oh shit, I think it's like, oh, I think it might have yoinked that, but that's kind of where it's just kind of accidental. The whole point was just for it to be like groovy, a head bobby, but not like a fast, aggressive. It was supposed to be like something that you could like in your car kind of bob your head to and not feel like you're supposed to speed up or slow down in your conversation or whatever you're doing. And I mean, well, pretty much every single thing with Royale, especially when it's like a heavy riffy thing that has, you know, like more overdrive and gain and stuff involved, it just always starts with the Les Paul. I've got a handful, you know, different Les Pauls, different eras that like do different things. Some are bitier and, you know, kind of snarlier. Some are really full and rich. And this was like a full, rich. I wanted like a thick, especially for the verses. I wanted like a thick tone. And so it starts with like this 89 standard Les Paul. I have two mains, and it's the 72 custom, and then it's this 89 standard. And they're so different, even though they look like Les Pauls, they're wildly differing instruments of how they sound and how they cut. And the 89 standard, it's got this big fat sound that's like not shrill, not like top end. It's a really full, rich sound, and you can hear everything that's happening. But again, it's like more gooey than it is like, you know, I'm trying to think of the right adjective, like snarly, cutting. It's not that. It's the opposite of that. That's what I was going for. Was like still definition, still be able to mute pick, but like, you know, borderlining almost on a fuzz, where you could still hear like the pick attack that's happening. And so I used just the 15-pound 89 Les Paul, which just has that sound. And then it's pretty much everything heavy with Royale is always like, I feel like if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like for that specific tool in a song, and a heavy distorted guitar is like it's like a type of paintbrush that you use. But whenever in Royale we don't really mix it up. It's not like 50 different amps and 50 different fuzz and stuff. I like to have like that kind of like a uniform, sort of like a heavy rhythm, chunky sound. And it's just, you know, Think about like any British, like, Marshall, Friedman type of tone. Like this one was basically an amp that I have. It's a 50-watt head. It's Karsten's amplifier. It's a Warm machine. It's 50 watt. It's a EL34s. It basically sounds like a Marshall from the early 70s. It's called the Warm machine because it's much warmer than a Marshall, which tend to be a little bit brittle and bright from that era. So it kind of has the things that I would find annoying about those vintage amps tweaked already to make it warm and gooey. And so I use that, just getting boosted with different overdrive pedals for different tracks. So each one's got a little bit different flavor. You got a tube screamer on one. You have like a Boss super distortion on another one. But that's basically, it's like just an overdriven old school Marshall, but not really, but like that's the idea with a Les Paul going into it, with just different types of overdrives for different colors and different bite on the front end, and like that's the basic meat and potatoes of that one, and again a lot of Royale heavy stuff. That's sort of the baseline, and then you add like guitars. We like to call them guitar sparkles. You add all the sparkles on afterwards with different type of textures and amplifiers and guitar tones, but that meat and potatoes is always pretty much a Les Paul bridge pickup, wide open, going through like a ripping Marshall with an overdrive, and then that's it. You don't really need anything else. 100%. There was absolutely. It was kind of like a lot of songs. You get the song like 80% done, and then it's like there's something missing. It's almost done, but like finishing anything that you do creatively is always the hardest part. Starting's hard, finishing I feel like is even harder. This one was like 80% there, but there was something missing. And then I go through these phases where I'll just randomly get obsessed with like an artist for a couple weeks, and listen to a bunch. Like for example, last year, I don't know why, but like I get my Spotify wrap up for 2024, and I had this phase where I was like listening to specifically like Madonna True Blue album. I don't know why, I just love Like a Prayer and Express Yourself, and so I was listening to a bunch of that, and like I wound up being like one of the top 1% of like Madonna listeners on Spotify in the world. I have no idea why, but same type of thing happened where I just for like a couple weeks I got way into specifically 80s Fleetwood Mac and 1987 Tango in the Night. It has Everywhere and Little Lies and just amazing. But all these songs, Lindsey Buckingham like went like nuts. They kind of like left him alone in the studio because they were all too busy doing drugs. And so like he got in the studio himself and like kind of went overboard and made all these crazy little loops and harmonized multi-layered guitar things for like intros to a lot of the songs. Like think of like the song Everywhere at the beginning. That's a guitar, electric guitar being played like direct into the board and then sped up and then like harmonized a couple guitars, and I just got this idea of like, what if I just made like this really beautiful melodic loop that fed into the melody of the song, and that would be like an intro sort of to kind of catch you off guard. Then when the riff hits, it's like, where'd that come from? And so once I got into that thing, and I had this cool loop, this melodic thing that I had down, which again was recording direct with like no, like literally direct to the board, like super dry electric guitar, which you never really want that tone or use that in life very often. Once that was done and you heard it kind of flow into the beginning of the song, it informed a bunch of other stuff, and then I could like grab little bits and pieces and different textures from that intro loop and sprinkle it throughout the song and like kind of tie it all together. So that was like the moment when like for me it was like an aha. I remember like we had a practice one night, we were recording and stuff, and the guys went home and I was still kind of recording, and like the next day I had emailed everybody like 1 o'clock in the morning or something, like, oh, check out what I did. And it was like suddenly like this whole brand new thing with all these new, and that's usually how it works, like happens in a day. And if you could bottle it and do it whenever you wanted, you would, but that's just kind of how creativity works. Yeah, certainly. I mean, creativity is weird. I mean, if you're a person that like writes songs or does any type of creative work at all, if you're like a visual artist or you do video or you paint or whatever you do, sometimes there are things in life or times in life where for whatever reason, like other things that are happening are pulling all of your energy in different directions, and you're not as in tuned to that creative river, that flow that you have access to that you normally do, and you don't have as much access to it. And that certainly happened in the last 5 years or so that we've been kind of like half dormant and starting to work on stuff, and just life and what goes on in life kind of like pulls your energy away from it. I had a lot of health issues that I dealt with, but like that was obviously something that for about a year or two, like I wasn't even thinking about music because I was dealing with like legitimately just really bad pain and surgeries and things like that for a while. So just put it on the back burner like anybody does when you have things happen in life. But then once things got better and things cleared up and then got to actually focus on it, your mind gets a little bit clearer, your goals get a little more focused, and you can actually finish up these things that you've started. And maybe you need some of those weird things to kind of take your mind away from it, so you come back with like fresh eyes and fresh ears, and then you can finish it. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I hear a ton of different stuff in it that it wasn't necessarily on purpose. When I listen back now, it's like, oh, I love this. It sounds like this. It clearly snuck its way in. Like, there's no doubt about that. But I mean, like, there's, in the main riff and the groove, there's the Melvins and Mastodon. In like the chorus, with like the more open strummed heavy guitars, it definitely like it just, after listening back, you're like, oh, it does kind of remind you of like Weezer Holiday, which who doesn't, if you're our age, like who doesn't love the Blue Album? Like everybody does. That kind of snuck its way in. Like I said before, like I didn't even realize it while I'm doing it, but it's one of those things that, again, it like probably sneaks into your subconscious, then it comes out in your playing. But like Don't Tread on Me and the Black Album, Metallica, kind of like that, like that quick little like 30-second note thing might have been them that snuck in. Like I said, it was like 80s Fleetwood Mac with the intro and the different textures that are happening in there. Well, like I said before, the riff itself has existed for, at least like 5 to 7, 8 years. I couldn't tell you exactly when. I mean, you probably find out when the first demo was if we can dig it up, what the date stamp is. But it's been a long time. That riff has been just floating around. Again, we had the main riff, which is like the verse riff in the song now, and then we had the middle section, which is like that real like syncopated, like super busy kind of like, again, it's very much like it's like a very Mastodon type of middle section. It's kind of the point where it's like, or like I think of like Rush, like one of those middle sections where the song changes and everybody gets to show off like how cool they are for a minute and then comes back in. And so that was always there. It was just really thinking about how to turn that into a real song and not just a collection of cool riffs. And then again, it was sort of like once I had done that kind of intro stuff that I was talking about, melodically I was hearing other things where suddenly I heard a verse that didn't exist before, and then I wrote a verse like literally like in an afternoon, like the verse was done, and then that was kind of like all that was missing was the verse and then lyrics. I hope that like if you are a fan of our band and you've listened to our music throughout the years, that like you hear it and it's familiar, because it should be familiar. Amalgamation of like a lot of different stuff that we have done, but like instead of like, it's like those different disparate things smashed together into one thing. Like I hope what it sounds like is familiar and also new, and also like say like it should be everything that, at least me personally, it's got everything that I love about our band kind of all thrown into one nice clear 5-minute statement of purpose of like what the band's about and like what like a platonic ideal of like a Royale song sounds like. Listen, since the last time that we were writing and recording, I mean, like, AI didn't exist at the time, and so like for me, like one of the biggest things I dealt with was like writer's block when it came to like lyrics and stuff like that. And I found it like really like a weird little tool to like, I would literally ask ChatGPT like questions about things, and I would like ask it to like write dumb poems and limericks about like certain subject matters, and I would just kind of like read things and get little phrase stuff and be like, oh, that's, and then like it kind of like helped, once I kind of like saw what like the computer thought of like the ideas I was feeding it, it helped me clarify like what my actual ideas were. And being one of those things where like specifically lyrically wise, it's the lyrics are about the lyrics. Like there's old school, there used to be rock songs about how cool rock music is, and they still have country songs about how country the songs are. But like this is the lyrics of this song are like about like writing lyrics for this song. It's like reading, like it was sort of like while I'm writing the lyrics, I'm like real time like talking about how difficult and the struggles, the everyday random bullshit you deal with trying to write lyrics, and then that's in the lyrics. So it's kind of like became this meta commentary on my own writer's block, trying to figure out what to write, and then I'm writing about trying to figure out what to write, and then I'm like, oh shit, I have a song, and then you just quit. Just achieve what it set out to do. It like became something so far beyond I think what any of us expected, that riff when we first started jamming on it years ago, what it turned into was this big, beautiful, boisterous painting that has little elements of every type of painting that we've ever done as a band, all in one giant canvas. And it turned into something well beyond whatever I thought it was going to be from the beginning, that's for sure.